Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Combating Cancer. My name is Gwen Kelly, and I'm your host. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. I'm so grateful you're here. For those who are new, I was diagnosed with stage 3 astrocytoma brain cancer at 19, and I created this podcast to be a safe, honest space for anyone whose life has been touched by cancer. Whether you're in active treatment, in remission, caring for someone you love, grieving someone you've lost, or just trying to understand what cancer does to a person, my hope is that these conversations remind you that you are never alone. Today's episode has been sitting on my heart for a while, something I've noticed about myself over the past couple of years that I haven't known how to put into words. Cancer changes your perspective in ways no one prepares you for. People tell you your hair might grow back differently. They'll tell you you'll deal with anxiety. They'll tell you life will never quite feel the same. But no one really talks about the smaller ways cancer follows you into everyday life. The conversations you have, the way you think, the things that suddenly don't feel as important anymore. I want to be careful here because I never want someone to hear me say their problem isn't a big deal. What's life-changing for one person may look completely different for someone else. If you've never had cancer, maybe losing your job is the hardest thing you've ever walked through. Maybe it's infertility, a friendship ending, a divorce, or anxiety that keeps you awake at night. Pain isn't a competition. I've never believed that. But trauma changes your baseline. It changes what your mind automatically goes to and what occupies your emotional energy. That's what I want to talk about today because here's what I've learned about myself. Cancer didn't make me less compassionate. It just taught me that emotional capacity is finite, and it forced me to find my limit a lot sooner than I ever wanted to. Let me tell you how I first noticed it. There have been moments someone wanted me to step into a disagreement or tell them who I thought was right or ask my opinion on something I would have had a strong take on a few years ago. Instead, all I could think was, I don't have the emotional capacity for this. Not because I didn't love them, because my mind was already caring so much about something else. Before cancer, I would have jumped right into that conversation, tried to fix it, tried to make sure everyone was happy, and spent hours afterward thinking it over. Now I just couldn't. For a while, I felt guilty, wondering if cancer had made me less patient, less able to love people well. And that scared me, because if there's one thing I never wanted cancer to take from me, it was that. But the more I've reflected, the more I realize that isn't what's happening at all. When you live through something traumatic, there's a part of your brain that never completely shuts off. Even when life is beautiful, even when your scans are clear, even when you're planning a wedding, building a career, laughing with your friends, celebrating milestones you once prayed you'd live long enough to see. There's still another MRI on the calendar. A quiet voice in the back of your head that whispers, what if this time is different? It's quieter than it used to be. I don't wake up every morning consumed by fear anymore, and healing has given me so much more life than fear ever could. But I'd be lying if I said cancer ever completely leaves your mind. It doesn't. It just becomes background noise. And that's one of the hardest parts of survivorship to explain to someone who hasn't lived it. Imagine trying to have a conversation while a radio plays in another room. Some days it's so quiet you barely notice it. Other days it's all you can hear. That's survivorship. The radio is always on. And because it's always there, I've had to get intentional about the emotional energy I actually have. I already spend energy wondering what my next MRI will say. I already know what it's like to sit in a waiting room bracing for my life to change, and to hear words from a doctor that split your life into a before and an after. And somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like I had to carry everything else too. Not because cancer made me selfish, but because it showed me my limit before I was ready to find it. For a long time, I fought that. I thought being a good daughter, friend, and fiance meant always being available, always helping, fixing, making sure someone else was okay. Maybe that's just my personality, or maybe it's what happens when something as hard as cancer makes you so sensitive to other people's pain that you can't stand the thought of anyone else hurting. If a friend was struggling, I wanted to solve it. If two people I loved were arguing, I wanted to step in and make peace. Eventually, I realized I was carrying things that were never mine to carry. Grieving with people, stressing with people, trying to fix situations I had no control over. And I was exhausted, not physically, emotionally. I was pouring so much into everyone else's lives that I wasn't leaving room to process my own. Here's the thing about survivorship that doesn't get talked about enough. Treatment ending doesn't mean you're done carrying heavy things. People look at you and think, oh, she's okay now. And in so many ways, I am. I'm healthy. I'm planning a wedding, living a life 19-year-old Gwen wasn't sure she'd get to have. And I thank God for that every day. But survivorship doesn't mean the uncertainty stops. It means you get better at living alongside it. Every clear MRI eventually turns into another countdown. Every milestone still carries a quiet reminder underneath it. None of us are promised tomorrow. That reality changes you. Not in a hopeless way, in an intentional one. It makes you ask, what actually deserves my energy? So when someone wants to pull me into drama that doesn't really matter, or debate who's right or wrong, or hand me weight that isn't mine, sometimes my honest answer is, I can't. I don't want to get involved. I just don't. Not because I don't love them, because I know what it's like to spend weeks wondering if the scan is about to change the rest of your life. And once you've lived that, some things naturally stop feeling worth carrying. That doesn't mean I've stopped showing up for people. I think I've gotten better at it because now I show up in ways that matter. I listen more than I talk. I ask people how they're really doing instead of assuming. I pray with people instead of trying to rescue them. I sit beside them instead of trying to drag them out of their pain before they're ready. I've learned the greatest gift you can give someone often isn't advice. It's presence. It's saying, I can't fix this, but I'm not going anywhere, and I'm still here for you. And that's true with cancer itself, too. When I was first diagnosed, I couldn't drive. In Minnesota, a seizure costs you your license for 90 days. So for 3 months, if I wanted to see anyone, they had to come to me. And they did. Friends showed up at my house with coffee and just talked to me about normal life. Nothing about scans, nothing about treatment, nothing they were trying to fix. They couldn't take away the seizures, undo the diagnosis. They couldn't give me my license back. But they sat in my living room and let me feel like a normal 19-year-old for an hour. And somehow that was enough. That's who I want to be for other people now. Not someone who feels responsible for solving everyone's problems, but someone who makes people feel less alone while they're walking through them. Two very different things. Underneath all of this is something I remind myself almost every day. Control is an illusion. I couldn't control my diagnosis, how my body responded to treatment, or whether my life would look the way I imagined at 19. Helping and fixing are not the same thing. Helping says, I'm here with you. Fixing says, I believe this outcome depends on me. Learning that difference has brought me so much peace because now I know I can love people deeply without taking ownership of every problem they face. I can encourage them, cry with them, celebrate with them, walk beside them, without carrying every burden as if that's the only way to prove I love them. No one ever asked that of me. It's just always been in my nature. And maybe someone listening needs to hear this too. Maybe you've spent years believing boundaries make you selfish, or that saying no means letting people down. Maybe you've been carrying everyone else's emotions for so long, you've forgotten what it's like to breathe. If that's you, I hope you hear this. Protecting your peace doesn't mean you love people less. It means you're recognizing that your emotional capacity is finite, and you can't pour into everyone else if you're constantly running on empty. I'm still learning this myself. Some days I take on too much, still feel guilty for saying no, still want to fix everything because that's easier than sitting with someone in their pain. But I'm growing, and maybe that's what survivorship really is. Not pretending you're healed from everything, but allowing yourself to keep healing. Cancer didn't make me less compassionate. It taught me that compassion and responsibility are not the same thing. I can care without carrying. If there's one thing I hope you take from today's episode, I hope it's that. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with me. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love if you'd share it with someone who might need to hear it. And always, remember you are never alone in the fight. That's all I have for you guys, but I will chat with you all next Wednesday.